Hi there, this is Cecily Roach, and this is a short summary feedback on the professional dilemma scenario assessment on the 11th of November. Within that session you were provided with a dilemma scenario, obviously, and your task was to first identify the main ethical concepts that you consider to be in conflict in this scenario. And you were then to recommend with justifications what the pharmacist should do next, that is, directly after the scenario occurred. It was clarified that you would be expected that your answer would include reference to the PSI Code of Conduct for Pharmacists 2009 and to principlism. The final few instructions included that your answer should be a maximum of 400 words, that you put the word count at the bottom of the answer, and that you'd be allowed 30 minutes for that session in the exam. And of course you did have a rubric to guide your answer to that scenario. So generally speaking, the results as reflected by the grades were really strong, showing that you had an understanding of principlism and the values in the Code of Conduct and how to apply them to a scenario like this, and that excepting for a few students, most of you actually identified a conflict between at least two concepts, and you did that very well. Some students that may not have got grades as high as they would have liked or anticipated, in the most cases, probably failed to identify a conflict. They may have listed several ethical concepts and therefore did get credit for that, but didn't identify a conflict between concepts, because that's what a dilemma is. So just to very briefly go through the 5 criteria that are in the rubric, and I do accept that we keep emphasizing the rubric is just a guide. Nonetheless, it may help you when you look at the grading, because it's obviously just graded against the rubric rather than feedback, commentary or text. The first one is that ethical concepts in the scenario and what leads to a dilemma. And the ideal would be that you'd have comprehensive and accurate coverage of the concepts in the scenario and the dilemma itself. So if you didn't identify a conflict, then you hadn't specifically related anything to a dilemma. And that you also show clear linkage with the values in the Code of Conduct, principlism, relevant legislation, and issues of consent and confidentiality as appropriate. Most people did that very, very well. There were a number of different types of conflicts identified, such as the conflict between duty of care and the right to autonomy, such as the conflict between duty of care to the individual and that societal responsibility, as would underpin a lot of the thinking behind vaccination programs generally. Some students chose to highlight a conflict between beneficence and non-maleficence, and that was absolutely fine too. There were at least 4 or 5 different types of dilemma highlighted and absolutely justified very well, etc. The second criterion on the rubric is around that concept of engaging in your analysis and the process of reasoning in a constructive manner. The reasoning is a process, and we always talk about that, and you come to junctures at various points in your decision making. So of course, if you like, the excellent descriptor for that criterion is something along the lines of the student demonstrates being able to actively seek to reflect, they demonstrate sensitivity to the ethical dilemma, and they reason towards a reasonable action option in a justifiable manner. So the vast majority of students gave a reasonable action option. A few forgot to give an action option and of course ended up not getting the grades for that. So have a look at that criterion and see what grade you were given there. The third, participation in the process of critical review in a professional manner, so that there were elements of critical review rather than just cutting and pasting from definitions that might have been available. So the excellent there would of course be that answers the question in the first instance and offers a critical analysis of the scenario, introducing ideally a variety of interpretations to the existing idea. The fourth criterion, making and justifying a decision in a manner that reflects the code of conduct and pharmacy and medicines law, of course, so not a decision, regardless of the justification, that wouldn't be in keeping with the code of conduct, and most students did that very well. And finally, that notion of expression. You were asked to give the word count, and most students did, but certainly not all. The expectation was that for an excellent grade it would be between 350 and 400 words, and most students certainly were within 450 words. One was a huge word count and of course had to be penalised because that wasn't within the criterion of the overall assessment process. I hope this helps. Wish you well over the next 10 days as you engage in your discussion fora. Have a look at the guidance that the rubric gives there as well. Not intended to hamper you in any way, rather to enable you and help you. And best of luck with all of that.